Welcome to the Deep Dive. Today we're tackling a topic that touches all of our lives, personal finance.
Indeed. And we're diving into Dave Chilton's book, The Wealthy Barber Returns.
Exactly. Pat Foran from CTV News called it funny, heartfelt, and timely. Our mission today is really to pull out the core wisdom, the practical advice.
Yeah, to give you a shortcut, basically. Understand the key financial principles without getting bogged down in, complex stuff.
Chilton uses a lot of common sense, simple principles.
Very relatable. And beneath the humor, it's solid financial thinking. So the goal is to translate that into clear, actionable strategies you can use.
Okay, let's get right into it. One of the first big ideas is this concept in a painful truth and a positive spin.
Ah, yes. This one's about how surprisingly small spending cuts can lead to, well, pretty significant increases in savings.
Right. He gives this example, doesn't he? Someone saving 4%.
Yeah, exactly. If you're saving 4% and want to hit 10%, you only need to cut your spending by about 6.25%.
Which sounds much more doable than thinking, I need to save 6% more.
Absolutely. It reframes it psychologically. Focus on the small cuts, not the giant savings leap. Tiny tweaks. Big results over time. Don't dismiss the small things.
That's a great takeaway. Okay, shifting slightly. Chilton talks about the lack of a savings support group.
Yeah. It's true, isn't it? Society often encourages spending.
Think about it. Friends suggesting dinners out, agents pushing bigger houses.
Even the government focuses on GDP, which is, mostly consumer spending. It feels like you're swimming upstream trying to save.
It really does. And Chilton says, basically, the only ones truly rooting for you to save are your future self.
Your financial advisor, maybe?
And him, the author. Makes you wonder, why is it so hard to resist buying more stuff?
Well, that leads nicely into his thoughts on the illusion of more stuff.
Ah, the pursuit of things.
Yeah, this idea that we chase material possessions way beyond our needs, but it often doesn't bring real lasting happiness.
It's less about need, more about image sometimes.
Pretty much. The key takeaway is that endless chase can leave you feeling a bit empty.
He quotes Bertrand Russell, something about preoccupation with possessions preventing us from living freely.
And nobly. Yeah, it's powerful. Makes you stop and think about what we're actually chasing.
And how society links success so tightly with financial wealth.
Definitely. Chilton brings up Ben Franklin's line, "It is the eyes of others and not our own eyes which ruin us."
And Jeffrey Miller's idea that we use goods to sort of market ourselves.
Right, to signal things about who we are or who we want to be seen as.
Like constant personal branding through purchases. Okay, let's dig a bit deeper. He talks about our faulty wiring.
The neuroeconomics angle, how our brains aren't always perfectly rational with money.
Especially with delayed gratification, right?
Exactly. That's a big one. He tells that story about the woman who stopped overspending on clothes. How?
She just stopped going into clothing stores.
Simple, but effective. It acknowledges how hard temptation is to avoid, especially with all the sophisticated marketing out there.
So true. Which brings us to the trap of infatuation. I think we can all relate to this one.
Yeah, that initial thrill of a purchase. He talks about consumer surplus, but more about how that excitement fades, especially for big, long-term purchases like a car.
The novelty wears off. Declining marginal utility or habituation.
Right. And we often don't factor that fading excitement into the buying decision. We project the initial buzz way into the future.
Neuroeconomics suggests our immediate feelings kind of overpower our rational side there.
Which ties into the influence of our reference groups, who we compare ourselves to.
Friends, colleagues, even people on TV or social media. Their lifestyles influence our spending.
He quotes Quentin Crisp's funny advice, "Never keep up with the Joneses. Drag them down to your level. It's cheaper."
Not very practical, maybe, but it highlights how much we look outwards.
And it fuels that competitive consumption idea, sometimes trying to outdo others, not just keep pace.
But then Chilton offers a counter. The power of perspective. This feels important.
Very. He suggests expanding our reference group. Look not just at those with more, but globally at those with far less, and even back at previous generations.
Yeah, thinking about billions without clean water or electricity, it puts our complaints about, non-HD screens in the SUV into perspective.
Isn't it just? Or wanting a heated steering wheel. It's humbling.
He mentions Julian Simon's optimism and how even he didn't foresee the abundance we have now. Cars, TVs, things we take for granted.
It really shifts your viewpoint, and this leads to something really practical. The liberating power of "I can't afford it."
This one really struck me. The story of Mark and Sherry Amos.
Yeah, how simply using that phrase consistently helped them cut spending and reduce stress.
It's like permission to opt out of the pressure, accepting reality we all have limits.
It's surprisingly powerful. Okay, moving on to the tools we use. The dangers of credit cards.
Ah, plastic. Makes spending so easy, doesn't it?
Almost too easy. Chilton cycle. See? Salivate, swipe, rationalize, rinse, repeat. Sound familiar?
Painfully so. And the brain scan stuff is fascinating. Spending triggers the pain center.
But credit cards seem to numb that pain response, making it psychologically easier to part with money.
And then there are lines of credit, or LOCs. He calls them insidious.
Right. They can be helpful for consolidating debt maybe, but their flexibility and low initial cost can be a trap.
People start treating it like a second income.
Or go on a spending spree right after getting one. The key point he makes is stark. It's not your money, it's your bank's.
That's crucial to remember. And related to this, banks being all too willing to lend a hand.
The story of the shopaholic who got approved for way more credit than she asked for.
And the loan officer's blunt answer, it's my job.
It's a business, right? They make money by lending. It puts the responsibility squarely back on you, the borrower.
Though he does share that interesting counterexample, the couple using a small LOC very strategically.
Paying it off quickly to earn the right to borrow again. Using desire as a motivator for discipline. Clever.
Okay, time for that story break about the Podleski sisters.
Ah, Janet and Greta. This is a fun one. Their cookbook idea faced tons of rejection.
But they were so determined they quit their jobs, ignored bills for a bit.
Just pure passion and persistence, and it paid off spectacularly in the end. A great reminder that sometimes unconventional paths lead to success.
Great story. Okay, back to the core advice. Debt in retirement, Chilton's view.
Strongly against it. It impacts cash flow, adds worry, introduces interest rate risk, just when you want stability.
Makes sense. He also points out a flaw in mortgage qualification.
Yeah, how lenders might approve the same mortgage for two couples with the same income, but ignore big differences like kids or pensions. It's not always a true picture of affordability.
So individual planning is key. And that brings us back to a fundamental, paying yourself first.
The cornerstone, really. Automate savings before spending. It often gets pushed aside for immediate wants.
But Chilton notes people are often surprised how little they miss the saved money once it's automated.
It just becomes part of the background. Then he discusses the perils of relying on inheritances.
A growing trend, apparently, people banking on an inheritance.
But it's risky, isn't it? Timing, amount, inflation. So many unknowns. Best to see it as a potential bonus, not a core part of your plan.
Good advice. Now, an interesting one. The value of spending summaries. He admits he was skeptical at first.
Yeah, he wasn't keen on tracking expenses initially, but he found it incredibly valuable.
How so?
It shows where the money actually goes, helps you cut waste and focus spending on what truly brings joy. You see how much the little things add up.
It forces choices, trade-offs. You can't have it all.
Exactly, which leads to the $64,000 question, retirement savings. How much is enough?
The impossible question, almost. So many variables, lifespan, returns, inflation, government benefits.
Right. It's all educated guesswork to some extent. So Chilton's advice is sensible. Err on the side of saving more. Better safe than sorry.
And huge factors when you start, the criticality of starting early.
Oh, absolutely. He uses that powerful Hank and Simon twin example.
Right, showing the massive impact of compounding and the cost of delaying saving, even just for 10 years.
It really hammers home the point. Don't buy into the idea of intentionally delaying saving early on.
Okay, what about guidelines? The 60-70% retirement income guideline.
It's a common target, aiming for 60-70% of your pre-retirement income. But things like defined benefit pensions can change the equation significantly.
So if you have a DB plan, you really need to understand it.
Definitely. Know your benefits. He also touches on legitimate and illegitimate reasons for saving less.
Acknowledging some might need less if our retirement plans are very modest.
But cautioning against undersaving based on fuzzy future plans, be realistic about your likely lifestyle.
Fair enough. What about emergency funds? Always a debate there.
Yeah, prioritize cash versus retirement savings. Chilton mentions using an LOC with a cosigner as one idea.
But emphasizes the best prep is living below your means and controlling debt.
That's the foundation, really. Individual circumstances dictate the specifics. Then a fundamental shift in thinking. Money is time.
$1 saved is $2 earned, considering taxes. Reframing costs by thinking about the work hours needed to earn that amount.
It's a powerful mental trick. Makes you pause before buying. And speaking of spending, Spend more on experiences, less on stuff.
This seems increasingly well supported. Experiences often bring more lasting happiness than material goods.
Right. That declining marginal utility kicks in with stuff. Experiences create memories. Leif Van Boven's research backs this up.
The bumper sticker wisdom. The best things in life aren't things.
And his parents' example, happy with less stuff because they had relationships, health, purpose, perspective.
Which brings us to some common themes in personal finance.
The message is often, keep it simple. Financial planning isn't necessarily rocket science. Time-tested principles work.
Simplicity is key, like the rule of 72.
A great little shortcut. Divide 72 by the annual interest rate to estimate how many years it takes for money to double.
Useful for investments or even thinking about house price appreciation roughly.
Exactly. Though speaking of houses, he addresses the illusion of wealth in home equity.
Just because your house value goes up doesn't mean you're instantly wealthy.
Right.
There are costs to maintain, costs to sell.
Precisely. He touches on reverse mortgages and AELOs as ways to access equity, but flags the costs, especially the compounding interest working against you with reverse mortgages.
Important considerations. Now, another story break. Dashed hopes? The horse racing venture.
Ah, yes. A funny but cautionary tale about speculative investments. Things don't always pan out, even with enthusiasm. Risk is real.
Good reminder. Okay, understanding investments. A misunderstood shortcut. Indices.
He clarifies what an index is, basically a benchmark, a tool like the S&P TSX composite for Canadian stocks.
You don't buy the index itself, but index funds or ETFs that track it.
Right. And he questions the simple passive versus active investor labels, too.
Interesting. Which leads to the math. Incredibly interesting math. The challenge of beating the market.
Why it's so hard, even for pros. The market return is the average of all investors. To beat it consistently,
You have to consistently outsmart the collective wisdom, including the pros. Tough job.
very tough. And made tougher by costs, which is the next point, when average isn't.
Fees, expenses. They eat into your net return significantly over time.
Which is why Chilton echoes Warren Buffett. For most people, low-fee index funds are the way to go.
Keep costs down. So, can you reliably pick winning funds? Section. I wish I could help.
He's honest here. He admits his own struggles and the general difficulty. Regression to the mean is a powerful force.
Past winners don't guarantee future wins. Fund performance often reverts to average.
Exactly. Now, a strong warning. Extra caution advised on borrowing to invest.
Leveraged investing. Sounds appealing when rates are low, maybe.
But the risk is amplified, especially in downturns. The stress can be immense, and the math, considering costs and uncertain future returns, often isn't as great as it looks.
Proceed with extreme caution, if at all. What about trying to time the market? Up and down and all around.
Big no-no. It's incredibly hard to do consistently. Most people end up selling low and buying high.
So riding out the volatility is generally the better strategy.
Which leads to the funny story, Oblivious, his father not knowing his portfolio value.
Sometimes not paying too much attention reduces the anxiety and prevents rash decisions.
There's some truth to that. Now, for an unorthodox idea, investing in companies you use but maybe dislike.
Mature dividend-paying companies. The logic being, if you use them despite disliking them, they must have a strong competitive advantage. A moat.
It's the opposite of Peter Lynch's invest in what you love. An interesting contrarian thought.
Definitely food for thought. Next, clarifying a widely held misconception about money leaving the market.
When a stock price drops, value is recalculated, but the money doesn't just vanish. For every seller, there's a buyer.
Good clarification. And then the silent killer, the spread.
The bid-ask spread. The small difference between buying and selling prices. It nibbles away at returns, especially with frequent trading.
So invest in liquid markets, trade less, minimize that friction.
Makes sense. Shifting gears to estate planning. I love you, but being an executor.
An honor to be asked, but a huge burden to actually do, especially now with complex estates. He suggests considering a corporate executor.
For impartiality and expertise, especially during an emotional time, which ties into why DIY for estate matters.
Dealing with estates after loss is tough, emotionally and practically. Get professional help. Don't try to wing it.
Sound advice. Avoid adding legal stress to grief. Okay, another tough prioritization. A tough call. Retirement versus kids' education, RRSPs.
The classic dilemma. Balancing your future versus theirs. He suggests maybe involving grandparents in RRSPs.
If possible, yeah. Spreads the load without derailing your own retirement plan completely.
A practical thought. And another simple practical idea. pre-authorized RRSP contributions and tax reduction at source.
Set up automatic RRSP deposits and apply to have less tax taken off each paycheck. Makes saving feel less painful on cash flow. Smart way to make it seamless. Now, the big Canadian debate. Battle of the abbreviations, TFSA versus RRSP.
Okay, the core difference. TFSA is after-tax in, tax-free out. RRSP is pre-tax or tax deduction in, taxable out.
And if your tax rate is the same going in and coming out, they mathematically work out the same if you reinvest the RRSP refund.
The big if. People often spend the refund.
Which often makes the TFSA effectively better in practice for many. Predicting future tax rates is tricky too.
So key reminders. Don't spend the contributions or refunds and just save more overall.
That's the main thing, which leads to the next dilemma. Are you sure? TSRSP versus paying down the mortgage.
Paying down debt is never wrong, reduces stress for sure.
Absolutely. Guaranteed return, peace of mind. But equities might offer higher long-term returns, albeit with risk and costs.
So maybe diversify. Do a bit of both.
That's often a good compromise, though if you're stretched financially with a big mortgage, prioritize debt reduction, especially if rates are rising.
Makes sense. Then he revisits life insurance. Unbowed on term versus cash value.
Still strongly advocates term insurance for most people's protection needs. Cheap, effective coverage when you need it most.
Cash value maybe only after maxing out TFSAs, RRSPs, and paying off debts.
That's his general guidance. Okay, a big step, understanding your advisor and investments.
Shocking how many people don't know how their advisor is paid or how their portfolio is doing.
Critical information. Then he offers a potpourri of useful points.
Right, lots of quick hits here. Diversify broadly, be wary of forecasts, challenges for young homebuyers.
Importance of updated wills. Don't DIY. Choosing executors carefully, making sure family knows where the will is.
Aware marriage can revoke a will. Factor low rates into insurance needs, good financial blogs, tax books.
Dividend stocks, DRIPs, the problem of paying for advice but not getting it. High MERS on some products.
The shift of fee-based advisors, likely falling costs over time, qualities of a good advisor, communication, learning, planning focus. Lots there.
A really helpful checklist of things to consider. And finally, the concluding story. A man with a plan.
The farmer with a simple, effective plan. RRSPs, spousal RRSPs, stable investments, updated wills, term insurance.
Contrasted with overly complex plans, the takeaway. A straightforward, disciplined approach often wins. Simplicity and consistency.
So wrapping up our deep dive into the Wealthy Barber returns. The core message seems to be that financial well-being isn't overly complicated.
Right. It's about understanding basics, making small, consistent changes, being aware of our own psychology.
And prioritizing long-term goals over that instant gratification pool.
Exactly. So we really encourage you, the listener, to reflect on what we've discussed. Maybe pick one or two things you can actually implement.
Start somewhere. And a final thought to leave you with. Which part of your financial life could most use a dose of that Chilton simplicity and a long-term view?
Think about that. Thanks for joining us for this deep dive into the Wealthy Barber's wisdom.